Hello, Stitchers. Welcome to Stitch Please, the official podcast of Black Women Stitch, the sewing group where Black Lives Matter. I'm your host, Lisa Woolfork. I'm a fourth-generation sewing enthusiast with more than 20 years of sewing experience. I am looking forward to today's conversation, so sit back, relax, and get ready to get your stitch together. Hey friends, hey, it's Lisa from Black Women Stitch and the Stitch Please podcast. And as I say every week, this is a very special episode because this episode might be the first one that is titled with the same title as a children's song. This one's called Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes. Knees and Toes. And it is based on this children's song because what I wanted to do was to give some top to bottom advice for ergonomics for sewing success. This is something that I really think is an important element of starting sewing. You just got your sewing machine. Congratulations. Take it out of the box, set it up. And when you set it up and you put it on the table, here is the next thing you should think about. After you've gotten your machine out of the box, you've got it set up, you are ready to start sewing, set yourself up for success by thinking carefully, not obsessively, but carefully about how you are going to position yourself in front of that machine. I like talking about this because my goal is always for longevity. When I am sewing, I want to be set up for success in such a way that I can sit at this machine comfortably for a long period of time. There is really nothing like bringing your sewing machine on vacation, which I like to do, and setting it up, and you're sewing and sewing and sewing, and the house is quiet, and the sun is coming up as you are on the sewing machine, or as I am on the sewing machine. That is an idyllic setup for your girl. Being in a beautiful place, sewing machine going, quiet, and the sun comes up, and it's really wonderful. I have done that on quite a few occasions. I have sat and sewn for 10, 12 hours and been just as happy the whole time, happy as a clam. And what I'm suggesting to you today is a way that you can set up your sewing system in such a way that you too could be comfortable and sew for as long or as short as you want. Ease is the goal. You want to be easy on your body, easy on your joints, easy on your nerves, and thinking deliberately about your sewing, its posture, and ergonomics can help that to happen. Longevity also has a second element. Not only do I want to sit and sew for as long as I feel like sitting and sewing, I also want this to be something I can have as a lifelong activity. I don't want this to be something that becomes so physically demanding that it becomes difficult to do it when my body is, as we age, things get a bit more difficult, like my sister says, I hit 60 and that check engine light comes on. These little things are just advice and little not warning signals, but reminders of our, mortality. All is to say, I want to sew for as long as I want, for as long as I possibly can. And setting up your body in such a way that ensures ease in your seating, ease in your posture, ease in how you're holding your hands. All of these things, I want you to have ease in your sewing practice so you can enjoy it for a long time. So the first section we're going to do in the head, shoulders, knees and toes episode is the head. And that is both mindset and focus, as well as a few neck exercises to think about to help you kind of relax. Now, it's important to begin with a good mindset to make sewing enjoyable and sustainable. For me, I like to put on some good music or a podcast. I like to reread my instructions so I know what I'm doing. I like to make sure that all of my materials are where they need to be. And that is part of basically getting me in my game, getting me in the good headspace for creating and for making. I like to try to minimize distractions. And that's why playing music on my phone or even putting my phone on Do Not Disturb if I can, if no one's expecting anything from me necessarily, it really helps me get in the zone. it also helps me to kind of concentrate and focus on what I am doing. And I want to think about the kind of the mental headspace before we even think about like how you're going to be sitting at the machine. Just remember that you can do this. And truth be told, if you think you can, you're right. If you think you can't, you are also right. So this is the opportunity when we're setting up the space is to prove to ourselves that we can. It is to set up all the possibilities for yes, we can. And that is, for me, just a few quick tips on how to get your head right for this. For me, and this is how I do it. I definitely see it as a whole vibe. And it's something that you have to set up right in order to work well. You know, if you're trying to set up a vibe, you're not going to put people together that you know aren't going to get along. You are going to be very careful and deliberate. And this is the same thing you do when you sit at the sewing machine. I will also say, don't be afraid. I have heard from quite a few people that are afraid. They're afraid of the sewing machine. They're afraid of, I don't understand it. Most adults who operate a sewing machine, more adults operate cars than sewing machines, and cars are way more scary than sewing machines. So again, getting yourself into the right mindset is a reminder that yes, you can, and you can do it. One thing I'll urge you to think about is as you are sewing, when you are looking down and your eyes should be at a 45-degree angle looking down at the bed of the sewing machine, I would caution you to relax as much as possible and to focus on feeding the fabric, letting the fabric be fed through over the feed dogs and through the sewing machine, rather than looking at the needle. I think looking at the needle for me is a way to get a certain type of almost like hypnosis, or it can lead to a bit of a distraction. I have found that, you know, the thing that many people are afraid of with a sewing machine is sewing over your finger. The times that I have done that, you know, really, honestly, you only need to do it once. You do that one good time, you won't do it again. And that's because the times that I have done it, I was not paying attention. I just wasn't paying attention. I thought I was finished. I lifted my foot off the presser foot too quickly, something like that. That is why I ended up sewing over my finger. Not because the sewing machine just up and decided to do it. It was my own operator error. And so when you're focused and you go into it in a focused mindset, you are less likely to make those types of errors. I will also advise you to just check your jaw. I find that sometimes when I'm concentrating really hard, I will take my tongue and press it to the roof of my mouth. And that's another way of kind of holding your jaw kind of at a intention in some ways. All is to say, relax. Relax your jaw. Make sure you're not clenching your teeth. Relax so that your tongue is just at the regular position it normally is in your mouth. And just breathe with it. And so that's what I would say in terms of just remembering mistakes are learning opportunities. They're not failures. It is not the end of the world. You can always unsew it. There is almost always a fix for a certain type of sewing error. So don't take yourself too seriously about that part. It is okay to make mistakes. Just get yourself set up and get in a good mindset so that you can have sewing be a relaxing and creative outlet for years to come. Like that is what I would love for you to be able to continue to do this. If you're just starting, great. If you've been doing it for a long time, also great. Let's just remember to keep our head and shoulders, on the right track. And so now we are to the shoulders. And this is really important. It is about posture. The shoulders are where I tend to hold a lot of my tension. And so because you are using your hands and arms to feed the fabric, you want to be seated in such a way that your hands and arms are at like a 90-degree angle, and you are just kind of feeding the fabric you're not pushing, you're more guiding the fabric. The feed dogs of the sewing machine are pushing the fabric through. They are feeding it through. Your task is not to pull it, and it is not to push it. It is to simply guide it and to make sure it stays within whatever seam allowance you have chosen. And so if you can keep your shoulders relaxed and not tensed and hunched, then that's going to make things a lot less painful down the road. Also, if you're leaning forward, you just want to make sure that you have some good lumbar support at your back. Some like an office chair. I really do like an office chair. I'm someone who gets an office chair from the surplus store. They cost like $5. They're really trying to get rid of them. And I have a cushion, a nice thick cushion that's designed for comfortable seating in an office chair. And I just take that cushion on every chair that I can find. If I'm traveling, if I'm going someplace, I know I'm going to be sewing. If I can, I will bring that cushion because it will be helpful. And it helps my like lower back and shoulders to just relax more into my sewing. And also you'll want to think about taking short breaks and stretching. Being aware of your shoulders is a big deal. I sometimes I get in the groove. I think I'm in the groove. Next thing I know, my shoulders are up to my ears because I'm just so focused and I've just gotten all tensed up and I don't recognize it. So take a pause, take a deep breath, tell yourself, when I get to the end of this seam, I'm going to pause. I'm going to lift my hands up over my head and wave my hands like I just don't care. Throw my hands in the air, not lift my hands, Lord. That's lift every voice and thing. Lift every voice and sing. I am going to raise my hands in the air and then wave them like I just don't care. Or you could do it downward. Anything that's going to just help you be more mindful of how your body is feeling. And again, listen to your body. This episode is about ergonomics. It's about like getting yourself set up for success, but you don't need to obsess over this. This is just something to be mindful and aware of. And just making sure that you are in such a mindset of, yes, I'm sitting down to sew. I'm really excited about this. This is what I'm going to do. I have this focused energy here. And I don't want to get so, for me, I don't want to get so into it that the next thing I know, I'm like curled over like a shrimp. And that's something that you can avoid. And we'll learn about that in section 3. Hey friends, hey, I know you're enjoying the audio version of Stitch Please, and thanks so much for listening. But you're missing out on all the great stuff going on behind the scenes. That's why I'm inviting you to join our Black Women Stitch Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, you can see all the video versions of the podcast. Plus, you get some amazing swatch cards. You know how much I love these swatch cards. Look, see how cool these are? Oh wait, you can't see them because you are not yet on the Patreon. So when you join the Patreon, you'll be able to see this, me showing you these amazing cards. We also have some great perks at the other tiers, like discounts, swag, office hours, and more. Don't be the last sewist in the group now. Head over to patreon.com/blackwomenstitch or click the link in the show notes and become a Patreon supporter today. We truly cannot do this without you. So thank you so much. Section 3, y'all. This is again, we did the head, we did the shoulders, and next is knees. And the knees section actually is about your table and your chair. The table and chair is a really important element in sewing. There are workbooks that OSHA, I think OSHA is the Office of like Occupational Health and Safety Administration. And they offer guides for lots of different industries, and they have one about sewing. And they talk about how important it is that a sewing machine operator have a good chair, have a good table, because that reduces workplace accidents. It reduces workplace injuries. And that sometimes happens when you are, sewing a lot and sewing, for work or sewing in industry. And so I mentioned earlier about the chair cushion that I have that I love so much, but this takes me to another question. And it's, what is more important, your chair or your table? What is more important, your chair or your table? In my opinion, I think it is the chair. I think the chair is very important because it can be a good way to deal with a bad table. So if you're able to get an office chair, for example, with no arms, I like a chair that doesn't have arms because arms get in the way. For me, that's my opinion. And what you can do is raise and lower that chair. So if you have a table that is too tall, for example, you can raise your chair a bit in order to get that to go together or to go as it should. You can also, let's talk about this in the next section about toes. You can also get a footrest as well, and that's something to consider. But the chair, I think it's easier to replace a chair than it is to replace a table. You know what I mean? That's why I think the chair is something that is more readily available. It's something that's easy to modify yourself. I have a variety of different tables in this sewing space. Some desks, for example, are just way too short to sew on comfortably for me. But I can kind of deal with that by putting the sewing machine on a box or making the chair a bit lower. But you'll have to just figure out and tweak your setup so that it can be efficient and comfortable for you. And the reason I was thinking about chairs is because you can also enhance the chair with a cushion. The chair can also be something that if it, again, as I said before, if it raises and lowers, that's really helpful. Because if, for example, you are at a table that's then too tall, it becomes something that you definitely want to fix and adjust later. I have tried to force myself to sew at tables that don't work with chairs that don't work. And it is very difficult. But I have an easier time sewing at tables that don't work with chairs that do. And that's just to say I've been able to overcome a not great table with a pretty good chair. I've talked about the table chair combination, and something you'll want to think about as we wrap up our section on knees is that when you're sitting, you are meant to have your knee and ankle down to the foot at a 90-degree angle. You don't want to have your foot extended with below the knee at like a 45-degree angle. You really want to be able to have it be very sturdy with your feet kind of planted on the floor. And that is because that helps to give you a really good sewing posture as you are guiding the fabric through your sewing machine. But I do have a great recommendation from LaShawn Bethia. She is Let's Get Social on YouTube, and she's been a previous guest of the podcast. And LaShawn is all about sewing while standing, and she uses a standing desk to sew. This was very new to me, though I did do some reading and see that they offer this as an option in industry. It's one of the OSHA recommendations for sewing stations that sewing machine operators in industry should have the option of sewing while seated or while standing, and using a standing desk as your table and having that additional option to sit or stand. They recommended that as a good practice. So I was pretty excited to see that LaShawn has already been doing this. Our last section is toes. We've done head, shoulders, and knees, and now we are going to wrap up with toes. The most important element down here, in the lower part of the body, is your foot, essentially. It's the pedal, the foot pedal for your sewing machine, the foot pedal. You need to decide how you are going to operate the foot pedal. Are you using your left foot or your right foot? I know most people that I know use their right foot, but I'm sure there's some people who are more comfortable using their left foot. I am a right-handed person and I am right, so I think I'm also right-footed. But if you are a left-footed sewing machine operator, if you use your sewing machine with the left foot, let me know. Send me a SpeakPipe message, DM me on Instagram. I want to know. I am very curious. So one of the things that I recommend is when you put the sewing pedal down and you get ready to sew, my foot pedal wants to go on a field trip. I put it down there, and then my foot is hunting for the foot pedal. I don't know where it has gone. It's probably run off with my bonnet. My bonnet, like I put it on at night and I wake up and it's gone. It's seeing other people. It's probably seeing my foot pedal now that I think of it. All is to say, the foot pedal of the machine is not something you really see, but you have to kind of detect and know it's there with your foot. I have taken to using masking tape to tape down the presser foot, like tape down the cord so that it doesn't slide around too much. If you want to use a different solution, they have these non-slip mats that prevent the pedal from sliding around while you're sewing. Mine doesn't disappear while I'm using it, but I feel like, I don't know if I just kick it. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll sew. I'll put my foot down on the foot pedal. I'll sew, a good amount. I'll get up. I'll go press something and I'll come back. Foot pedal gone. Where? Just moved a whole 8 inches from where it was. Now, this is a very minor inconvenience. The thing did not leave the house, okay? But when I tell you, I get so irritated, like, you have got to be kidding me with this. This is something that happens on domestic sewing machines. If you're working on an industrial or semi-industrial, the foot pedal is built into the table. So they're much wider than these little tiny 6-inch wide foot pedals that come with a lot of domestic machines. But use tape or get yourself a non-slip mat in order to get it to be more stable so you're not hunting for it. You can also, as I mentioned previously, they sell stands, almost like little footstools that you can set up underneath your machine if you are finding that you can't get your foot to a 90-degree angle. And that's going to be an important consideration so it doesn't hurt your leg or your back or anything like that. So that's why we recommend sitting at a 90-degree angle and also having your arms that way as a more, I think, organic position for the body. Now, I'm going to leave you with something that you can figure out for yourself if you are a new sewist and just opening the machine fresh out of the box. But there is a pretty great shoe debate. Yes, shoe. SHOE, shoe debate in the sewing community. And maybe it's not a debate. Maybe it's just a preference. But to ask the question, when you're using your sewing machine, when you operate the sewing machine, do you wear shoes? Do you wear slippers? Do you wear socks? Or do you go barefoot? I think it relates to how shoes are used in the house overall. Though I do know we are a no shoes in the household. So we park our shoes at the front door and then we wear slippers or socks. So if I'm sewing, I'm using slippers or socks. However, I have even gone to like sewing classes at places and brought my slippers because I don't feel comfortable sewing in a shoe. I don't know why. And I know some people feel the same way about driving in a car, which I find interesting. I definitely drive with my shoes on because I guess I go to the car with my shoes on. But all is to say, you'll have to see what works more comfortably for you. I think it's important to remember or think about how you tidy up your sewing area because a pin in your foot is not a fun experience. And I don't want that for you. One last thing on that point, if you are working with hand needles and you go to put a needle away or put it somewhere, if you're putting a needle in a pin cushion on your wrist, if you're sticking a needle somewhere on the table so you can use it later, always keep it threaded. Do not have a lot of unthreaded needles, kind of like loosey-goosey nearby. Even when I have needles in a pin cushion or needles that I'm going to put back into the pack, I'll keep the thread on them just in case. And this is because if you happen to step on a needle, you will want to be able to pull it out. You will want to be able to pull it out. You will want to be able to pull it out. I know it's a grotesque thought, and I don't wish that on anyone. And if you wear shoes in the sewing room, you don't have to worry about it. And if you wear slippers, and you don't have to worry about it at all. If you wear socks, you're taking a risk. If you wear no socks or shoes and are bare feet, you're also taking a risk. But then again, you know that, right? Because this is how you typically are in your space. So on that note, I want to thank y'all so much for listening to this episode on the head, shoulders, knees and toes, ergonomics for sewing success. Some final recommendations. Just remember a head to toe approach about mindset, posture, setup, foot pedal comfort, all of that stuff. Prioritize an adjustable chair if you have capacity to do that. And even if you can't buy a fancy, expensive chair, which you don't need, you could also just get a really nice cushion so that you can sit comfortably. You want to be comfortable and supported. Speaking of comfortable and supported, are y'all on the Black Women Stitch newsletter? You should totally sign up for the Black Women Stitch newsletter. We got behind the scenes stories and some fun follow-ups. So please subscribe to the Black Women Stitch newsletter. There is a link in the show notes or links in our bio on social media. So thank you so much for listening to the show today. And please subscribe, rate, and review Stitch Please on any and all platforms where you're listening to the Stitch Please podcast. We really appreciate it, and we thank you so much for your support. So come back next time, and we'll help you get your stitch together. You've been listening to Stitch Please, the official podcast of Black Women Stitch, the sewing group where Black Lives Matter. We appreciate you joining us this week and every week for stories that center Black women, girls, and femmes in sewing. We invite you to join the Black Women Stitch Patreon community with giving levels beginning at $5 a month. Your contributions help us bring the Stitch Please podcast to you every week. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. And come back next week and we'll help you get your stitch together.